Emily Dawson, a woman with Down syndrome, walked into the bank with pride, ready to open her first savings account, a testament to months of hard work. But instead of receiving support, she faced public humiliation at the hands of insensitive employees. Just when all hope seemed lost, an unexpected voice echoed through the hall. To everyone's astonishment, it belonged to a famous Hollywood actor. What happened next left the entire room speechless. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, be sure to subscribe. Tomorrow, we have another special tale waiting for you. The morning sun poured through the windows of Emily Dawson's small apartment, casting a warm glow over the cozy space filled with personal touches. Family photos lined the walls, and colorful sticky notes with reminders were carefully placed around the room. That morning, Emily was especially excited. After months of saving a portion of her earnings from her job as a cafe server, she had finally gathered enough money to open her very first savings account. It was a significant milestone, a symbol of her independence in a world that often underestimated her. Clutching her notebook, she carefully reviewed the steps she had written down for opening the account, checking each detail one last time. The pages were filled with scribbles and notes, a testament to her determination to get everything just right. "Today is the day, Emily. You can do this," she told herself in the mirror, repeating the phrase like a mantra of courage. When she arrived at the bank, the scene was chaotic. Lines stretched to the door, impatient customers grumbled about the long wait, and the staff looked overwhelmed, scrambling to keep up with the rush. Emily took a deep breath and stepped inside, clutching her folder of documents tightly. She could feel the curious glances of some customers and employees, but she stayed focused on her goal. Joining the line, she quietly rehearsed what she would say to the teller, mentally reviewing her notes to ensure she wouldn't forget any details. Finally, it was her turn. She stepped forward and was met by Brittany Stanton, a bank employee whose tired, impatient expression showed she had little interest in small talk. Without looking up, Brittany asked in a monotone voice, "What do you need?" Emily offered a shy but hopeful smile. I'd like to open a savings account, please." Brittany took the documents from Emily and skimmed through them quickly. Her expression shifted to one of boredom and frustration. With a sigh, she pushed the papers back across the counter. "You filled this out wrong, here and here. We can't accept it like this," she said dismissively. "You need to come back with someone who knows how to do it properly." Emily blinked in confusion. She was certain she had followed every step correctly. Clutching the papers, she tried to explain, "But I checked everything. I followed the guide exactly." "Look, sweetheart," Brittany interrupted, her tone dripping with condescension. "There's no point in insisting. This is wrong. Come back with a guardian or someone who can help you." Emily felt her hands tremble slightly. Brittany's cold, dismissive words chipped away at her confidence, but she refused to give up. I'm my own guardian. I can prove—" Before she could finish, Brittany rolled her eyes and, with an exasperated sigh, loudly announced for the entire bank to hear, "You're wasting my time. Let someone else handle this." Silence fell over the room. All eyes turned to Emily. Humiliation burned through her as she lowered her head, her face flushing, tears threatening to spill. The weight of the moment was suffocating. Still clutching her documents, she could hear the hushed whispers around her, some filled with pity, others with judgment. the humiliation was unbearable. But just when it seemed like the moment couldn't get any worse, something unexpected was about to happen. Emily remained standing, trying to summon the strength to endure the embarrassment. The murmurs of those around her pressed on her chest like a heavy weight. Clutching her documents tightly, she tried to remind herself why she was here, her independence, her hard-earned accomplishment. But in that moment, it all felt so distant. "Please wait over there," Brittany said, motioning to a nearby chair. Her tone was still cold, impatient. Emily obeyed, walking to the seat under the weight of countless stares. Sitting down, she carefully spread her papers out, going over each one to figure out what she might have done wrong. "I did everything right. I did everything right," she whispered to herself over and over. Minutes later, a man in a suit approached her, Greg Morgan, the bank manager. He walked toward her with a smile, at first friendly, but with an undertone of patronization. "Hello, Miss Dawson. I'm Greg, the manager. I was informed about your situation. Why don't we have a quick chat?" he said, motioning for her to follow him to a quieter corner of the bank. Emily took a deep breath and followed, sitting across from Greg at a small table. She began explaining, again, why she was there, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. Greg listened with a patient expression, nodding occasionally. But as she spoke, his smile shifted, becoming more condescending. I see, he interrupted mid-sentence. "But I have to ask, are you sure you're ready to manage a bank account on your own? Something like this can be complicated." The question hit Emily like a blow. She swallowed hard, steadying herself before responding. "Yes. I know how to take care of my money. I worked hard to get here." Greg leaned back in his chair, clasping his hands together on the table. "Look, I'm not saying you're incapable," he said, his tone smooth but patronizing. "But our protocols require certain formalities. For example, your documents don't have a signature from a legal guardian. That could be an issue." Emily furrowed her brow, confused. "I am my own guardian. I can sign." Greg let out a short, uncomfortable chuckle, as if trying to downplay the moment. "Well, technically yes, but we need to make sure everything is appropriate. Why don't you come back another day with someone who can verify this for you?" A surge of indignation rose within Emily. She knew she was being treated unfairly. Before she could respond, murmurs rippled through the bank. Some customers quietly defended her, while others muttered prejudiced remarks under their breath. The tension in the room was palpable, but something was about to change everything. Comments, someone muttered from the line. "She probably doesn't even know what she's doing here," a man scoffed. "Why do they let people like that try to handle complicated things?" Another voice chimed in. Emily tried to shut out the whispers, but their words echoed in her mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. Still, she refused to back down. "My documents are correct. I read everything before I came. I want to open my account today." Greg let out a long, exasperated sigh. "Wait here. I'll check on something." He stood and walked over to Brittany at the counter. From her seat, Emily could hear snippets of their conversation. Greg was speaking in a hushed voice, but his frustration was unmistakable. He shook his head and muttered things like, "We can't waste time on this. It's obvious she can't handle something like this on her own." Emily felt tears welling in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't show weakness, not now, not after all the work she had put into this. Then, she heard the sharp click of a phone camera. Turning slightly, she saw a nearby customer taking a photo of her. "This is just so sad," the person whispered to someone else. Emily's stomach twisted. Her humiliation had turned into a spectacle. She hadn't realized how many people were watching her, judging her, treating her as if she were nothing more than a tragic scene unfolding before them. She lowered her head, ashamed, feeling utterly alone, exposed, and trapped. But as she sat there, trying to compose herself, something unexpected was happening. The image of her, visibly shaken, clutching her documents, was already circulating on social media. The moment was about to take on a life of its own, reaching far beyond the walls of the bank. And amidst all the chaos, in a quiet, unassuming corner of the room, sat a man who had been observing everything. Keanu Reeves. Dressed discreetly, as he often did during his rare public outings, Keanu had come to the bank for personal matters. But now, his attention was fully locked on Emily. He had witnessed everything: Brittany's cold indifference, Greg's condescending attitude, the cruel whispers of the onlookers. Every word, every dismissive gesture had been carefully noted. Now, he sat still, thoughtful, as if weighing his options, deciding when and how to step in. Meanwhile, Emily remained seated, meticulously organizing her papers for what felt like the 100th time. She was desperately clinging to her dignity, though the redness in her tear-filled eyes betrayed just how much the moment had worn her down. Keanu watched her intently, his expression serious, almost somber. Something was about to happen. Keanu's expression remained serious, clearly unsettled by what he had witnessed. "People like her are always underestimated, aren't they?" An elderly man nearby murmured, noticing Keanu's intense focus on Emily. "It's painful to watch this happen." Keanu gave a small nod but said nothing. His gaze remained locked on Emily and the bank staff. He knew that when he stepped in, it had to be at just the right moment. Across the room, Greg and Brittany were still deep in conversation. Even from where he sat, Keanu could pick up snippets of their exchange. Unproductive, time-consuming, not worth the effort. Each dismissive word only fueled the frustration brewing inside him. He adjusted his cap, taking a slow, steady breath, visibly trying to stay composed. Meanwhile, Emily gathered the last of her courage and stepped forward once more. Clutching her papers tightly, she tried again. "I've done everything I was asked to. Please, I just want to open my account." Greg barely looked up from the documents on his desk. His reply was cold, detached. "I've already explained. Without a legal guardian, we can't do anything. You'll need to come back another day." Emily's hands trembled, but she refused to back down. "But I am my own guardian," she said, her voice shaking with frustration. Greg sighed and raised a hand dismissively. "Miss Dawson, I've told you already. Come back another day with a legal guardian. Do I need to spell it out for you?" The words hit her like a slap. She stood frozen for a moment before finally turning toward the exit. Each step felt heavier than the last. The whispers around her continued, some filled with pity, others laced with quiet disdain. Then, suddenly, "This has gone far enough." Keanu's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade, calm but unwavering. He rose from his seat, his steps deliberate, filled with an unmistakable sense of determination. As he approached the counter, he watched as Brittany prepared to dismiss Emily once again. But before she could, he stopped her with a quiet yet commanding voice. "Can you explain why you're treating this customer like this?" Brittany turned sharply, startled by the interruption. Her irritation flickered into momentary confusion as she glanced at the man before her. Dressed casually, his features partially hidden under his cap, she didn't recognize him immediately. "Sir, this is none of your concern," she said, attempting to maintain her professional tone. But Keanu didn't move. His piercing gaze remained fixed on her, waiting for an answer. Keanu slowly removed his sunglasses, revealing his identity. The reaction was immediate. Brittany's eyes widened in shock, and murmurs spread through the crowd as nearby customers recognized the Hollywood star. Despite the growing whispers, Keanu remained composed, his focus unwavering as he looked directly at Brittany. "When something like this happens in public, it becomes everyone's concern," he said, his voice steady and firm. "So, I'll ask you again. Why are you treating this customer this way?" Emily, who had remained silent until now, turned to Keanu in astonishment. She couldn't believe he was standing there, standing up for her. For the first time that day, she felt like she truly had someone on her side. Brittany, trying to regain her composure, straightened up and responded defensively. "Sir, we're just following the bank's protocols." Keanu crossed his arms, his gaze locked onto hers. "Protocols?" he asked, leaning in slightly. "Or prejudice disguised as bureaucracy?" A heavy silence fell over the bank. Every eye was now on the unfolding scene. Brittany opened her mouth to respond but hesitated, unable to find the right words. Just then, Greg, noticing the commotion, hurried over, his expression strained. Though he tried to mask his nervousness, it was clear he knew the situation was spiraling beyond his control. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, feigning ignorance. Keanu turned his sharp gaze to Greg. "Yes, there is." He pointed toward Emily. "This customer came here to open a savings account. She followed every requirement, brought all the necessary documents, and yet you're treating her as though she doesn't belong here." Greg forced a polite but firm tone. "Sir, please understand. We're just ensuring that everything is done correctly." Keanu didn't let him finish. "Number, what I understand is that you're creating unnecessary obstacles. Why?" The tension in the room thickened. With every eye now on him, Keanu picked up Emily's documents and carefully reviewed them. After a moment, he looked back at Greg and Brittany, his voice calm but unwavering. "These documents are correct." He placed them back on the counter. "So, let me ask you one more time. Why aren't you helping this customer?" The bank remained utterly silent. Emily, still stunned by the unexpected intervention, looked at Keanu with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. She never imagined that someone so famous, someone with no obligation to help, would be standing up for her against such injustice. Greg cleared his throat, desperately trying to regain control of the situation. "Sir, I understand your concern, but we have strict protocols to ensure the security and efficiency of our services," he said, forcing a calm tone. "This isn't about discrimination. We're simply following the rules." Keanu held Emily's documents firmly in his hand, his expression unreadable. Keanu skimmed through the documents, lifting one of the pages and pointing at the form. "Protocols?" he asked sharply. "Then tell me, exactly what is wrong with these documents? Because from what I see, everything is filled out correctly. All the required information is here." Brittany, now visibly nervous, struggled to respond. "Well, sometimes the documents are complete, but we need to ensure that the person fully understands what they're signing." Keanu slowly turned to her, disbelief and indignation flashing across his face. "Are you suggesting that this customer, who followed every step, gathered every required document and came prepared, doesn't understand what she's doing. That's not what I meant, Brittany stammered, but her voice faltered. We just want to ensure there are no mistakes. Keanu let out a short, humorless laugh. The only mistake here is how you've treated this woman. You've humiliated her publicly, disregarded her dignity, and now you're trying to justify the unjustifiable. That's unacceptable. A palpable tension filled the air. Customers in the bank murmured among themselves, some in quiet support of Keanu, others watching the unfolding drama in silence. Greg, sensing the situation slipping beyond his control, attempted to redirect the focus. Mr. Reeves, we're not trying to create a problem. I understand your concern, but this isn't a simple matter. If we could resolve this more discreetly. No, Keanu interrupted, his voice cutting through the room. This won't be handled discreetly, not when this customer was humiliated in public. The discrimination she faced was public, so the resolution will be public too. Emily, who had remained quiet until now, felt something stir inside her, a spark of courage she hadn't felt before. She stood up, gripping her papers tightly. Though her voice trembled, it was filled with determination. I just want to be treated like everyone else. I deserve respect. I worked hard to save this money. I followed all the rules. What more do you want from me? The room fell silent again. Emily's words echoed with a strength no one had expected. Keanu turned to her, gave a small nod of encouragement, and smiled slightly, as if to say, "You've got this." Greg, clearly flustered, made another attempt to regain control. "Miss Dawson, please understand. We're not trying to be unfair. It's just that, well, in certain situations, additional oversight is necessary." Keanu's eyes narrowed. "Additional oversight?" he challenged. "Or just prejudice disguised as bureaucracy? Because so far, all I'm seeing is an institution that would rather push away customers than serve them." Brittany glanced at Greg, waiting for direction. Greg exhaled sharply, clearly uncomfortable with how the situation was escalating. "Fine," he said begrudgingly. "Maybe we can review the documents again and—" "Not maybe," Keanu cut in, his tone firm. "You will review the documents now, and you will treat this customer with the respect she deserves." Greg struggled to maintain his composure, but it was clear he felt cornered. He gestured to Brittany, who hesitantly took the papers and began reviewing them once again. As the tense silence stretched, a young woman in line suddenly spoke up. "I've never seen anything like this. She brought everything she needed, and you're still making it harder. Is this really how you treat people here?" Another customer chimed in. "They do this all the time, always complicating things for the people who need help the most." The murmurs grew louder. The situation was quickly turning against the bank. Minutes passed as Brittany reviewed the documents, her expression growing more anxious with each second. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. "There's nothing wrong with the documents. They're correct." Greg, now out of options, shot her a sharp glance, but knew he couldn't keep up the charade any longer. Turning back to Emily, he forced a tight-lipped smile. "It seems everything is in order, Miss Dawson. We'll proceed with opening your account." Before he could close the matter, Keanu raised his hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "This doesn't end here," he said, his voice steady. "I want to know why you made this so difficult from the start. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a pattern. And patterns like this need to change. Right now." The tension in the bank was thick, the weight of accountability finally settling on Greg and Brittany. Beside Keanu, Emily still clutched her papers, her relief evident, but her newfound confidence shining through. The murmurs from the customers surrounding them grew louder, creating an undeniable pressure that neither Greg nor Brittany could ignore. Keanu stepped forward, holding Emily's documents as though presenting irrefutable evidence in a courtroom. "So, if the documents are correct," he began, his voice cutting through the room, "why did you spend so much time trying to prevent this customer from opening an account? I want a clear explanation, and I won't accept protocols as an answer." Greg cleared his throat, struggling to maintain his professional tone, though his unease was evident. "Mr. Reeves, there's no discrimination here," he said, his voice wavering slightly. "These are just guidelines we follow to ensure the bank operates efficiently." Keanu arched an eyebrow, his voice tinged with sharp sarcasm. "Guidelines?" he repeated. "Then explain to me how these guidelines justify the condescending tone, the interruptions, and the public humiliation this customer endured. Because frankly, this looks more like institutional prejudice than efficiency." Brittany opened her mouth to respond but hesitated. Under the weight of Keanu's gaze, Emily's quiet strength, and the murmuring crowd, she blurted out the truth. "It's not my fault. This is just how we're told to handle situations like this. Customers with special needs or comprehension issues usually take more time." "Take more time," Keanu repeated, his voice rising slightly. "And because of that, you'd rather push them away than provide them with the same service as anyone else." Brittany looked down, avoiding his gaze, while Greg stepped in, trying to regain control of the situation. "This isn't an official policy, Mr. Reeves," he said, his tone defensive. "It's just practices that have developed over time to—" "To what?" Keanu cut him off, his indignation clear. "Make your jobs easier? Save a few minutes at the expense of respect and dignity? This practice may not be written down, but it's as real as if it were carved into the walls of this bank." Emily, emboldened by Keanu's unwavering support, raised her voice toward Greg for the first time. "So, I'm not the only one you've treated this way, am I?" The silence that followed was heavy, and murmurs rippled through the crowd. A man in line raised his hand. "They do this with seniors, too. My mom had to come back 3 times because she didn't understand the forms."